Have you ever wondered what the ultimate reef tank lighting system would look like? You know, the benefits that you would get out of it per se, as well as kind of the costs associated with it? Well, if so, then this episode's for you, because what we're going to do is we're going to start a multi-part video series that will last probably about 2 to 3 years, where we're going to follow one man's quest to design and implement the ultimate reef tank lighting system. Again, I'm Russ Kickle, and stick around for another episode of American Reef. Before we move on to the lighting segment, a couple housekeeping items. Number one, I wanted to announce the winner of the 2013 Winter Free HPD for Your giveaway. And that winner is actually a gentleman by the name of Kevin Craig. So Kevin, if you're watching this video, check your email out. Basically, it's the email that you actually purchased the HPD with. Ultimately, the goal is for us to communicate to see when you would like to receive that HPD, right? Just kind of coordinate schedules. For those of you who didn't win, I'll be offering another free HPD for a year. This will be the spring of 2014, so I'll announce it probably about the March time frame. And again, the idea is simple. If you are an HPD, if you've purchased HPD in the past, or you're a Reef Tutor subscriber, what I do is reach into a hat, pull out basically a name, and that winner will basically get HPD free for a year. When I say free, I mean free, meaning that we pick up the cost for shipping, everything, right? So all we got to do is coordinate schedules, and basically you'll get HPD free for a year. And what that translates to is roughly about one container, one of the 8-ounce deli style containers a month. So, if you want to use it, that's fine. If you really want to give it to your friends, resell it, totally up to you. I'm cool with whatever you come up with. Lastly, what we want to do is, I got a lot of requests for basically some kind of online vehicle to order the HPD. As such, what I did on AmericanReef.com, right, on that homepage, if you look down on the bottom, in the middle, you'll basically see a PayPal Buy It Now button, where you can order either 1 or 2 containers of the HPD. If you want to order more, basically just send me an email, again, AmericanReef@me.com. Just send me an email over and we can work out the details. Basically because I can ship anywhere between 6 to 12 containers for roughly $11, something like that. Whereas, when you buy individual containers, basically the cost is about $6 to ship it. So if we go that, multiple container route, there's some savings to be had there on the shipping, and again, I'm happy to work with you either way I can. So let's talk about lighting now. So whose tank are we going to be following for the Ultimate Reef Tank Lighting video series? Well, it's going to be Mike Patetta's, and it's going to be that 300-gallon mixed reef that you've seen either in the American Reef YouTube videos or the American Reef iTunes videos. If you've actually seen the video where we talked about the ultimate kind of holiday gift ideas for a reef keeper, you'll know that basically in that video, that's where Mike started to talk about the idea of wanting to put together a metal halide and LED combination to basically help give him a reef tank full of ultimate coloration and growth. And so that's kind of that combination of what he did. Now, this video is brought to you in part by Bulk Reef Supply. You've heard me say many times, they're good guys, honest guys, they won't let you fail, right? And I chose them as a sponsor of American Reef because of those three categories. And a small example of what I mean by they won't let you fail, for example, is the products in this video. Again, whether it's the lights, the bulbs, the reflectors, right? These are all kind of products that you can get at Bulk Reef Supply. But you know, one thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is Bulk Reef Supply just doesn't carry every product under the sun. They only carry products that they know work, right? And again, they are like in their category known to work. And obviously you have kind of good, better, best kind of solutions, but ultimately they have this kind of criteria that they will go through before any product goes onto their website. So that means, again, they're not going to let you fail. They're not going to sell you something that you got to kind of throw away. Now you may want to migrate to something better, but ultimately what they're going to sell you is a good product, and it's gone through some various kind of decision-making process to make sure that that product is good. And again, that's a small example of why I believe that if you have any kind of reef keeping need, go out to bulkreefsupply.com and give them a chance to earn that business. Now let's head on over to Mike Patetta and let's see what he's trying to do. Okay, Mike, what are we doing today, sir?
Today we're going to talk about how to optimize the lighting in the tank. I've already gone to optimizing it in terms of water motion when I shifted over and started using the sea sweeps and the Tunzi streams. And as a result, I'm getting really nice growth. I'm not getting the amount of detritus settling on the corals that I was. I'm not getting the overall dirt in the tank that I was. I mean, it's interesting to me that the bottom front has stayed relatively clean compared with my upstairs tank where I have less flow, and as a result I'm getting more detritus settling on the bottom. By having much greater flow, a lot more than I thought I would get, I'm getting a lot of growth, particularly the Aphilias are all open and happy.
Right.
I mean, the Xenia, even though it's getting blasted, is growing and doing well, and the SPS have really started to take off. So from my point of view, I've now optimized water motion within the tank. I think I already have the optimal skimmer. I have keeping the optimal parameters going. So the last thing, and the thing that is probably the most controversial in the entire hobby, is how do you optimally light the tank?
Right.
Now I've spent a significant amount of time talking with people like Sanjay Joshi, Jake Adams, Victor from Worldwide Corals, my friend Jeff at Aqua World, people that I trust in terms of they've been playing and manipulating lighting for the past year, particularly LED lighting, which, as we all know, is more or less where the hobby is shifting to. But as with everything in the hobby, we should probably move more incrementally than jumping in with both feet. Right now, from my standpoint, this tank is thriving as much as it has since I've set it up.
So you want to break it and change the lighting.
So I'm going to change it and try to make it even better.
And that's what this episode's about, breaking your system.
Doing something stupid by changing everything, because I'm not known for just sitting still. Inertia's not my friend. So I'm always trying to find something a little bit better, tweaking it, and I'm willing to take the risk so that basically you don't have to.
Right.
So the other hobbyists hopefully learn from my mistakes, which there are lots of, because I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, which is hard to imagine. And I'm trying to do something sort of crazy, but sort of where I see things going. So incrementally, I'm changing over the lighting on the tank. The first thing I want to stress is how different things are. When we started the hobby a long time ago, what we used was a lux meter. A lux meter is basically designed to see how bright things are, but it's designed to see how bright things are from a human's eye perspective. So a lux meter primarily measures yellows and greens, which are the colors that we see optimally. We realized, that was when I was using the old Kmart 3000 Kelvin metal halide bulbs in a tank, produced a lot of lux, but the corals didn't thrive, and we didn't really understand why, because we really didn't understand the concept of PAR. PAR is the concept of photosynthetically active radiation. That is the amount of light that the corals can successfully use. That is energy that's useful to the corals, not just yellow and green lights, and that's when we started using a PAR meter. So by using a PAR meter, that's when we started shifting up to bluer and bluer, higher Kelvin bulbs. First there were 10,000s, then there were 14,000s, then there were 20,000, and I'm sure somebody out there probably has a 30,000 bulb, so it's just blue as deep, deep ocean. But now we can measure how much is going on and how much energy we're getting to the corals. Obviously, the more energy in, the more growth out. So we want to try and get as much PAR as we can. By the same token, we also want it to be optimally visually pleasing to us. We want to look at the tank and go, that looks really good. And we also want to get as much energy in without spending as much energy. That is, metal halides, for the most part, are relatively very efficient. In terms of watts per PAR, they're relatively very efficient. The LEDs coming out now potentially are even going to be more efficient. Why? A metal halide secretes lights, or exudes light, or however you want to say it, puts lights in 360 degrees. It's a tube. Or LEDs, on the other hand, focus the light down in one spot. That's why if you could have a metal halide that just focuses straight down, that's why we have these huge luminarc reflectors to focus as much of that light, but you still lose a significant portion of it through the reflective process. But by having things going straight down like the LEDs, they may not seem to be producing as much light because they're not shooting it into the room, they're not shooting it up to the back of the tank, they're not illuminating the room, they're focusing it all downwards into the tank. And that's why we get a lot, potentially more efficient lighting than we have. Now in this tank right now, I don't have the LEDs on, but what I have is a 250 watt 6500K bulb, which looks yellow-green compared with the 14K Ushio, and much more green compared with the 20,000K radium. I mean, you can see how different the colors are.
Right.
Now, there's a cost benefit to this, and that the blue corals look really blue under the 20Ks, and a lot of the other corals look really vibrant, and it's visually pleasing. This looks kind of harsh and kind of bleak, but you also get some added benefits with this. Whenever I remember back from when Sanjay Joshi was just really getting serious about lighting, he was running his tank exclusively on 6500K Iwasaki's. He may have had an actinic in a little bit, but it was just supplemental. But with those 6500Ks, he had some of the most vibrant corals because the growth rates were phenomenal. And as we all know, the faster the growth, brighter the growth tips, that's where the most color is. You get a lot more coloration in the corals. And in his tanks, he would grow corals that were like cinder blocks. I mean, they would grow so thick and so profusely, he would have to go in with a chisel to take the corals out. And I'm not talking about the skinny little branch things. I'm talking about Acropora humilis, Samoiensis, things that we don't usually keep much now because they're more difficult to keep, and they tend to not look all that exciting, particularly under 20K or higher Kelvin bulbs. But in his tank, the thing that was also interesting is the tops of the coral, where the polyps were, the very tips were one color, the branches were another, and the base was the third. Because of getting so fast a growth, he was getting a lot more visually appealing corals than what we're seeing now. So from my standpoint, that's one of the reasons why I'm going to do things a little bit differently. That is, I'm running the Radiant Pros as the primary light because I want it to be visually appealing. I want to get the luminescence of the coral. I want to get all the benefits that you get from an LED light. Less expensive to run, less heat, all of those things. But by the same token, I'm going to supplement it with 6500K 250 watt Iwasaki bulbs.
And that's for your growth, right? That's
for my growth, but I'm only going to run those conversely to how we've typically run lighting. Well, we've typically done it as SPS keepers is we run the metal halides primarily and we augment them with LEDs.
Right.
I'm doing the opposite here. I'm going to run the LEDs for 12 hours per day, but I'm only going to run the Iwasaki's from 1 to 3 hours per day. I'm just going to give the corals that one blast of high intensity light for a relatively short period of time, and then these are going to give me the visually appealing, the bioluminescence, and the coloration, but I'm going to get the growth and the great coloration from running the Iwasaki's. And to be realistic, the Iwasaki's are primarily going to run when I'm not going to be home.
Sure.
They're going to run in the middle of the afternoon like they typically would on the ocean. That's when they're going to get that blast of bright light. Obviously on the weekends I'll be able to see it, but I'm not going to be here to see that, so I'm going to get the benefit of having the visually appealing light when I'm here.
Right. And again, your goal is optimal lighting for growth and color.
I'm trying for the best of both worlds.
Right.
Typically we've had a trade-off. That is, if we ran primarily blue lights, blue LEDs or blue radiums, we had really nice colored corals. There's one caveat to that though that I'll talk about in a second, but we didn't get the kind of rapid growth that we got under the Iwasaki's.
Right.
The Iwasaki's are par monsters. This produces roughly as much par as the 400 watt 14K for 150 fewer watts.
Right.
So I'm getting a lot of par out of a much smaller footprint per se, electrical footprint.
Right.
The other thing I'm getting is, as I said, there's a caveat to what we're getting in terms of coloration. When we're running the higher Kelvin bulbs, we're also losing things. That is, the vivid pinks of Stellophoras and Seriatoporas aren't as vivid pink. They get sort of this washed out purpley bluish pink. They're not like you see in the ocean. They're not like you see when you first get them. And we don't really think about that, but that's because they've color shifted due to the lights. By the same token, if you run yellow corals in here, they tend to turn green. And a lot of the purple corals tend to turn kind of blue.
Sure.
Even some corals like the Red Planet and the Tierra del Fuego are more green than the vivid red, which is why we got them in the first place, running them under the radiums. So as a result, I'm looking to not only get optimal growth, but optimal color from two standpoints. Optimal color from the Radiant Pros, and optimal color from running the Iwasakis and the high growth.
Sure.
As I was talking, one of the optimal things I want to do, or one of the reasons I want to see if this is the optimal way to light a tank, is I do have some corals in here that haven't done as well for me as they have in the past under lower Kelvin bulbs, but they've survived, but they're not really as vibrant and as growing and as thriving as they used to be. One of which is the Paletta pink tip. I obviously didn't name that after myself, because I don't have a pink tip, although some would say the top of my head's a little pink, but basically, if it's not happy, it's just a green coral. It's popsicle green, so it's a nice colored coral, but when it grows and thrives, it encrusts very quickly, it grows incredibly fast, but the most cool thing is it's bright green with vivid pink tips. And one of the more interesting things about it is, I got it in a trade in 1999 for writing an article for a company that's no longer in business, and the owner of the company said he brought it back with him in his suitcase from the Philippines. So it's pretty much the first Filipino coral in the U.S. because they had been banned forever. He has family there that do collecting and everything else. So he brought this little tiny green with a slight amount of pink to it, and he traded it for me for writing an article for him for his website.
Right.
And it is all over the country. Everybody has it. I just got another colony back, or a little fragment back, because I lost my colony when I switched over from the 1200 to this tank.
Right.
But in the 6 months that I've had it, it hasn't grown at all. So that's one of the corals that I can honestly say I know it very well, so I can see how rapidly it grows, if it grows back to the old potential that it has. Because even now that the optimal conditions are present in the tank from every other standpoint, I still don't think I have the optimal lighting system. So that's one of the corals I'm going to look at. I'm also going to look at the Spathulata coral from Australia, because I've spoken to a lot of people that have tried to keep them. In virtually everyone's tank, it tends to fade and not be the vibrant colors that it was before. It's a close relative to the Milliporas. So what I'm thinking is, based on what I saw from Sanjay's tank, if I can get that 6500K powerful intensity, lots of power, and get really good growth in the coral, I may get it back to the vividness of when it came in. Which if I do, that makes doing this all the more worthwhile. There's also two other corals that haven't done particularly well for me. They've basically just been there. One of which is a Shades of Fall from Ming and Atlantis. It's a really nice kind of pale yellow and peach and green color coral. It's a really gorgeous coral. Sanjay had a colony in his tank this big. It was under 10K lights. It was absolutely gorgeous, and it had grown this big from a frag in a couple of years. Well, I've now had a frag of it in this tank from Sanjay for 11 months. It hasn't grown, I mean, a millimeter. It hasn't encrusted, it hasn't done anything. It hasn't died, but it hasn't really grown either. That's another coral that I can watch. And the third coral is the Tierra del Fuego, which is a coral that, it's Del Fuego, a fire. It's bright, vivid red when it's doing well. But under the 20K radiums, it's now green. That and the Red Planet, both of which have turned pretty much green in my tank. I want to see if I can get them back to the vivid coloration of them. As I mentioned before, the Stellophoras, the Seriatoporas, the bright vivid pinks are one aspect. But these corals that morph into different colors haven't morphed into coloration that I really want with the lighting that I've been using. So optimally, if I get what I want, I'm going to have even brighter, healthier, more full of growth corals. Obviously this tank is packed, so what that means is I'm going to have to take some things out, but that's what I've always done. I basically get everything, and then I pick what I want, and I have enough friends and other people that will take my sort of seconds or thirds, which are still really nice, vivid corals, but they're not the optimal things that I want. So going to this is going to allow me to look at things that I know very well, that I've observed for the last 6 to 9 months and haven't really seen anything. So everything else in my tank has been fairly stable and optimized, particularly once we went to the better, what I consider better way of wave motion within the tank, or water motion within the tank. And I've become a lot more meticulous in managing the water quality within the tank. It's a topic for another discussion later on, but by doing that, I've gotten the encrusting and the growth in a lot of the corals in the tank, but on those 4 or 5 that I just mentioned, I've gotten minimal to no growth, but I also haven't gotten the coloration that I would expect from them. So hopefully in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, I'm going to be able to document and see how much more growth and coloration I've gotten using this optimal lighting system. But that's just the light itself is just one aspect of what I'm thinking in terms of optimal lighting. One of the reasons I picked the Radian Pros is, 1, they're low profile, 2, they're large spectrum, but 3, they don't produce a lot of heat within the system. One of the problems with producing heat is it also produces instability within the tank. When I say instability, one of the things we've always stressed is we want the tank to be as stable as possible to be like the conditions in the ocean. Unfortunately, on this size tank or larger, if you want to keep things stable, particularly in terms of temperature, you have to run a huge skimmer or a huge chiller, which costs a ton of money. It's not very efficient, and it's not the optimal way to maintain things. Even running it, you're going to get a degree or 2 difference within the system. Running these metal halides now, in the summertime, I'm getting about a 4.5 to 5 degree temperature swing over the course of a day. And in the wintertime, like now, I'm getting about a 3.5 degree switch. Even running fans like you hear in the background, or fans underneath the tank, or fans across the tank. I'm not running a chiller because I'm tired of that worry. And after seeing what happened with Sanjay's chiller, I'm even more concerned about it. So increasing the stability of the tank by not getting the wild fluctuations in temperature, I also think is going to optimize the success of the tank. Also, by the same token, I'm not going to get the evaporation rate that I am now. Right now, I'm evaporating out anywhere from 2 to 3 gallons of water per day. A lot of it is being drawn out by that humidity dehumidifying fan and a dehumidifier I have in the bathroom. But I'm dumping fresh water in, I'm taking old water out. I'm still causing a change because it's not precise. If I can reduce the amount of water changing within the tank, I'm also going to get greater stability within the system. Lastly, I'm going to get better stability within the room. Just in the course of turning these lights on, the lights for this video, the room temperature has increased 5 degrees. So it increases very quickly. So all of those things go to the stability of the tank being greater. By not having to change the bulbs every 6 months like I've done, that's going to increase the stability of the system. If I say that, every time I do it, I measure the PAR of the lights that I'm taking off versus the PAR of the lights I'm putting on. I raise them up, I shorten their duration, then I lower them, increase the duration. All of that is not a stable system per se. So what I want to try and do is make this as stable as possible. By running the Radian Pros, which have a life expectancy of lasting about 5 years, and running the same Iwasaki 6500s for the next 4 to 5 years, because they're only on 2 hours a day, I'm going to have a lot more stability from that standpoint too. I'm not going to constantly every 6 months or so, because of wild fluctuations in the lighting on the tank. It's going to be stable pretty much day to day. I know you can increase cloudiness or have thunderstorms of all of that, but really what we all want is stability within a tank. Those are nice little toys to play with, and when I had these, I turned on the thunderstorm for the first day or 2. But after that, it's kind of just a toy you don't really play with. And if you have it on variably, unfortunately, at some point, you'll be coming downstairs in the middle of the night, you'll see this thunderstorm going on, and you'll think your house is on fire, which is what I did. So you don't really use that toy as much as you would the first day. It's like getting a pool table. You play pool for the first week and then you don't do it anymore. It's the same thing with a lot of the bells and whistles on these. So what I basically want is a nice, stable system in terms of temperature, in terms of light, in terms of not changing the bulbs, and in terms of not dumping new water in and out of the system constantly. And I think by doing that, I'm going to get the kind of growth and coloration that I'm looking for and have what I really consider the optimal way of lighting a tank.
So Mike, you talked about why you're coming up with this optimal lighting. What is the optimal lighting? What's the solution?
Well, as I said, there has been a trade-off between growth and coloration.
Right.
And I think by doing this, I'm going to get the best of both worlds. Optimal growth that goes along with optimal coloration. The other aspect to it is lighting a tank is the most expensive aspect of running a tank. in that I have a friend who lives in approximately the same size house that I do. He's a single guy. His electric bill is roughly $69 per month. My electric bill is roughly $199 per month. Even more in the summertime because I have to cool this room even more than I do the rest of the house just to keep the tank controlled. So optimally, in terms of lighting and stability, I think using the Radion Pros and a little burst of metal halide is going to give me that. But I also think in the long run I'm going to save money. I'm not going to address the financial situation and talk about numbers here. I'm actually going to be doing an article for Coral Magazine about what I went through to pick out the lighting, how I picked what I consider the optimal lighting system, what I'm looking to see, and the economics of it. Because it's not just the cost of running the electricity for the lights. It's the cost of the electricity for the dehumidifier and the fans, and for most people a chiller. It's also the cost of water, constantly losing. I mean, that's minimal.
Still.
But it's still something else. It's having to change the RODI unit that much more frequently. I won't have to do it quite as often. There's a lot of different aspects that go into the financials. As I said before, even if I'm saving money on running the lights and electricity, I'm not going to have extra money in my pocket. I'm going to spend it on something else in the hobby. That's just how it is. And that's how most of us are. We spend what we can. As we all know, once you're into this, you're pretty much addicted to it. So I can either spend the money on heroin or cocaine. Either way, it's still an addict. So I'm either going to spend the money on electricity and lighting, or I'm going to spend it on new corals or rare fish. And that's how everybody is. I mean, you have a certain set amount of money you can spend every month, and you sort of break it down. Okay, I'm spending this on electricity, this on fish, this on food, this on corals. Well, if you cut out the electrical part and you can spend it more, you're going to, I mean, obviously I don't need more corals, but I'm sure there's some new toy or something else. There's always new products. I mean, that's one of the nice things about the hobby now. There's lots of new products that are useful and making the hobby easier. And that's one of the nice things I really enjoy about this, compared with 30 years ago when I started, when we had to make all our own equipment. And I'm not exaggerating.
Right.
Julian and Charles and John Burles and I would talk all the time about what we were making and manufacturing. I mean, we all were basically craftsmen. We built the stuff from scratch because it wasn't available. There were no radiant lights. There were no metal halides. I mean, we bought things that should have burned down on our houses from Kmart, and there were no blue lights per se. I mean, John Burleson came up with that in the mid-'80s. Compared with now, we're in a lot better space than we were before. So, I mean, one of the other aspects of this that I hope to show is how this tank has changed and progressed when I give my talk at MACNA next year, looking at the optimal things that are so much better now than they used to be. I'm going to give a talk on the history of reef keeping, but I'm going to also show how much things better are now. One of the things I'm going to show is optimal water movement, optimal lighting, all the things that have made the hobby a lot better and a lot more rewarding for not only myself, but for a lot of hobbies. And that's what the goal is. It's not a competition. There are no real secrets to this, but what the goal is to enjoy this as much as you can. And I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have done this for so long if I didn't enjoy it as much.
That sounds like a good place to kind of transition to, let's just do a quick overview of the hardware behind it, right? And we'll come back 3 to 6 months later, right?
Right. Now the hardware for this is some old and some new.
Yep.
The old is I'm using electronic ballasts, and I'm switching them, just a little turn of the switch from 400 watts to 250 watts, which is really nice because I didn't have to go out and buy new ballasts. So one of the cost savings, of course, but also going from 250 to 400, 150 watts times 8 hours has to save me something in electricity. Now, but that's just a small portion. As I said, that's the supplemental lighting. The main lighting are the Radion Pros. As I said, I talked to a lot of people and saw a lot of tanks and saw what I wanted to see running with these in terms of coloration, in terms of health of the corals, in terms of overall effect of the lights. These were the lights I preferred the most. So that's why I went with these, and they have a very low profile. The ballasts and everything else are sitting off to the side, so you just have basically this little small box, so you don't have anything really obtrusive, and you can hang them, or I have them mounted so they're basically sitting within a little framework within the top of the tank so they don't fall in, obviously, because we all know how our lives work. Everything bad always happens where things fall in the tank. But this is the basic system. There will be 6 Radion Pros on this tank and 3 250 watt Iwasaki's in the Hamilton reflectors. That's basically it. And the metal halides will only be on for 1 to 3 hours. They're starting off for an hour a day. and then it'll shut off and go to 3 hours over time, over the course of the next couple months. And the radios are starting off at 50%, and I'm giving them 6 weeks to ramp up to that pace. So nothing really is going to be spectacular probably until the new year, and that's when I think things will dramatically start to increase as I've gotten everything acclimated. Because my one concern is, this tank is doing very well. I don't want to bleach out everything overnight. And I've done that enough in the past, so I've learned enough not to do that. As I've said, for the last 25 years, nothing good ever happens in a reef tank fast. Only bad stuff happens. You don't wake up one morning and the little frag of a table coral is this big. No, but your big table coral like this may be bleached.
Right.
So doing things slowly and incrementally is what I'm trying to do to gradually get to that optimal level. So the only other things I have going on with this are, the nice thing about the Radians are with the EcoSmart Live system, they're all wirelessly, easy for you to say, wirelessly connected to each other. So when you program the first one, all of them are programmed at once. So as a result, whatever you pick, however you choose it online, or you can go with their new wireless remote, you can program it however you want, very quickly and effortlessly.
Now, how are you programming yours? In other words, remember we went through, what was the settings that you chose?
I chose the optimal color setting.
Okay.
When you go onto their website, you can see everything from shallow reef, which is a brighter yellower light, to deep reef, which is a bluer light, even a planet tank, or optimal coloration. Since I'm running the metal halides, what I wanted to do is get optimal coloration of the corals with the lighting system they set, plus what I'm doing on the side. So it's very easy. It gives you the prompts. It was one of the simplest systems, and believe me, I'm technologically challenged. So this was a very nice, clean, elegant system for programming these kind of lights, where you're not having to fuss with everything. You're not having to program each one individually. Once you did one, they all work and they all run simultaneously with one another. So from that standpoint, it's a nice, easy system to work with.
So you got 6 and 9 lights total.
Yeah, there's a lot of light on this tank, and this is actually going to be comparable to what I was running when I ran the 1,200 gallon tank. I'm going to have about as much light. The only difference was I had that tank situated so for 6 months a year it would get 4 to 5 hours of natural sunlight.
Right.
And as good as all of these lights are, we still can't mimic natural sunlight. But by the same token is, I've seen enough corals being grown under natural sunlight that for the most part they all turn brown.
Right.
You don't get the vivid colorations like you do in here. I mean, even things like the Oregon tort coral are not as brilliantly colored in natural sunlight. So from this standpoint, I'm trying to get the best of both worlds. The growth that you get in natural sunlight, which is why these people have these greenhouses, and the colors from the LEDs. So from that standpoint, I think that's why I think this is the optimal way to go.
Okay. And so again, it's a 1 year long kind of project, actually multi-year.
I'm looking for this as a 5-year project, but what I'm going to try and document it over initially what I'm doing, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and in that way take pictures and videos along the way.
Right.
So I mean, pictures are worth 1,000 words. I mean, everyone will be able to see if the corals are growing faster, slower. I mean, it's easy to see that some of them have not grown because they're just the same as they were when I put them in. So we'll see if they grow faster, which I'm hoping for, and if they get better coloration.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting test. But, I mean, I think it's something necessary to see where we are with lighting, because you still have the two schools of LEDs aren't ready for prime time, LEDs are ready for prime time. Because realistically, what I would hope would happen over time, if I find out that the metal halides aren't having any effect, I will eventually take them off and just go to all LEDs.
Sure, you got it.
So I don't have a problem with that, but this is sort of the incremental next big step from my standpoint.
Yeah, very good. And as far as the proud sponsor of Mike Patetta's Lighting Utopia?
As I said, you can get virtually everything here from Bulk Reef Supply, all in one nice package. Talk to them. They have a pretty good idea what I'm doing, although nobody really knows because I sort of do a lot of this. I do this on the fly a lot. But no, I had this in my mind's eye what I was going to do.
Right.
I mean, I've cut the stencils out on the top for where I need to cut to fit everything. I measured everything. Everything actually does fit. I got the electricals all lined up. My electrician was in and rewired part of the room. So if I have to handle more stuff, I can do that. So from that standpoint, it should run fairly smoothly, but as we all know, nothing in this hobby really works smoothly all the time.
Right.
So hopefully over time, as you watch these videos, we'll keep you informed of what's taken off and how well everything's doing, and you'll be able to see for yourself. I mean, hopefully you can see from the last videos how full and happy everything is from the last time when we just changed the water motion. Obviously, I added a few things. I've become a euphilia addict now, but that's just part of the package. Some of the SPS corals have really started to take off as well, and I've had to start fragging some things and breaking some things up because the growth really has taken off since I've improved the water motion.
Very good. Well, this sounds like a point where to cut it, and then what we'll do is we'll come back in that 3 to 6 month time frame. You're going to check out Coral Magazine. When are you going to have that article for
the first one? Hopefully will be in the next issue.
Okay. So look for that, and until the next time, right?
Yep.
And